Government data released this week shows that inflation rose 3% this year through June, above the Fed's 2% target, but down from its 9.1% peak last summer. Now, President Biden, he's doing a victory lap, claiming his handling of the economy, which he calls Bidenomics, led to this cooling of the increase in the rate of inflation. But as working families continue to suffer, and with the 2024 presidential election perhaps hinging on the economy, can the president claim credit for an inflation rate that already has soared on his watch? I mean, families are paying about a 15% increase when they go to the store. That's what average families are paying over prior to the time of Mr. Biden coming into office. Well, joining now to discuss this and more is E.J. Antoni. He is a public finance economist and research fellow at the Heritage Foundation. E.J., welcome back to Washington Watch.
Thank you for having me back.
So let's talk about this. The president crows about the inflation rate decreasing. Does he think the American people forgot that it skyrocketed when he took office and is still higher than it was in January 2021?
I think that's exactly what this White House is counting on, gaslighting the American people, because if they actually talked about the facts, if we really had a discussion about the data, then it would be clear how much of a failure Bidenomics has been. In fact, you can very easily make the case that Bidenomics is what gave us that 9% inflation rate from about a year ago, and that it is the throttling of Bidenomics by a now divided Congress that has brought inflation down. In other words, as we are borrowing, spending, and printing less money, we have less inflation.
Let's talk about the impact, though. And look, let me be very clear. I am happy that the inflation rate is down from 9.1% to 3%. I mean, it's trending in the right direction. But let's talk real dollars here. Let's talk about how the average American family stands today and their buying power, as opposed to prior to Bidenomics, if you will, taking over our policy.
Certainly. One of the things that Biden always loves talking about is the fact that nominal wages, in other words, the size of your paycheck, right, the number of dollars you get, has risen dramatically under his tenure. That part of the story is true. You're getting, on average, 12% more per hour. But the problem is that prices have risen so much faster, as you just said, that those larger wages, that bigger paycheck, actually buys you less. And so for the month of June that we just finished up, the latest data shows us that the average American worker, this is astonishing, paid a $4.55 an hour tax through inflation. And we have to remember that inflation is a hidden tax. It is the mechanism by which the government transfers wealth from you to itself in order to pay for its profligate spending. I can't think of a better definition of a tax than that, a transfer of wealth from you to the government. In other words, inflation has effectively doubled the income tax rate for the average American worker. Again, the only word I can think of here is devastating.
Well, actually, defrauding is a word that I can think of, because they're defrauding the American people. In fact, the Bible speaks to this about just weights and measures. And when you're inflating dollars, you are devaluing those dollars. And so you're literally robbing from the people who work for that money.
That's an excellent point. And, the definition of usury, for example, has changed over the years, exactly what that means, whether or not it's taking any interest on a loan at all, or whether it's taking excessive rates of interest on a loan. But I think one thing that is very clear is that in the case of inflation, the government is essentially getting a kind of interest on dollars that you have. So the government is literally siphoning off a percentage of all the dollars you have. The latest rate is 3% a year. And what's particularly scary about that 3% is that there's no sign it's going any lower. In other words, if you look at the change we've seen from month to month over the last year, it has been surprisingly steady, and it is not going below that 2% annualized rate. In other words, inflation today is about 50% higher than where it was before Biden took office. And the reason for that is because government spending, borrowing, and printing of money is so much higher than it was only a few years ago.
But will the president use this lower number to justify additional government spending?
Oh, most likely. This president has shown a proclivity to use any excuse at all to justify higher levels of government spending. So I have no doubt that that will be the next thing in his crosshairs.
All right, EJ, thanks so much for joining us today. Always great insight.
Thank you for having me.